Welcome to Into the Mind of Darkness, the twisted tale of William Suff. Kimberly Little was a young woman with dreams and aspirations. She lived in Riverside County, an area that was plagued by a string of unsolved murders of women, primarily sex workers, during the 1990s. Kimberly had fallen on hard times and, like many others in her situation, turned to sex work as a means of survival. On a fateful evening in 1992, Kimberly ventured out to a dimly lit street in Riverside County to solicit clients. Unbeknownst to her, William Suff had been prowling the area for victims. Suff, a seemingly ordinary man with a job as a warehouse clerk, was leading a double life as a ruthless serial killer. As Kimberly approached a car that had pulled over, she couldn't have known the danger she was in. Suff, pretending to be a potential client, engaged her in conversation, luring her into his vehicle. Kimberly, trusting and desperate, got into the car, unaware that she had just sealed her fate. Once inside the vehicle, Suff's true intentions became clear. He overpowered Kimberly, subdued her, and bound her wrists. Her desperate cries for help fell on deaf ears as Suff drove her to a remote and desolate area in Riverside County. There, he subjected her to unspeakable acts of violence and brutality, tormenting her until her life was extinguished. After Kimberly's life was brutally taken, Suff callously discarded her lifeless body in a secluded location. Her disappearance went unnoticed for a while, as she was just one of many sex workers who had gone missing in the area, and law enforcement struggled to make connections between the cases. It would be some time before investigators would close in on William Suff. In 1995, he was finally apprehended and arrested on unrelated charges. It was during this time that evidence linking him to a series of gruesome murders, including that of Kimberly Little, began to surface. Suff's arrest and subsequent confessions sent shockwaves through Riverside County and the nation. He revealed chilling details about the murders he had committed, including Kimberly's, and provided evidence that led to his conviction. In 1995, he was sentenced to death for the murders of multiple women, bringing some closure to the families of his victims. William Lester Suff, the man infamously known as the Riverside Prostitute Killer or the Lake Elsinore Killer, was born on August 20, 1950, in Torrance, California. His early years gave no indication of the darkness that would come to define his life, but as his story unfolded, it revealed a deeply disturbed individual. Suff grew up in a relatively stable family environment in California. He attended high school in Redondo Beach and went on to serve in the U.S. Army from 1969 to 1972, where he learned combat skills that would later play a sinister role in his life. After his military service, he briefly attended college but dropped out, embarking on a tumultuous path marked by crime and violence. Suff's criminal record began with petty offenses, but it quickly escalated to more serious crimes. He had a history of theft, burglary, and arson, often targeting women's clothing, which would later foreshadow his violent tendencies. He was in and out of prison during the 1970s and 1980s, serving time for various offenses. Suff's reign of terror began in the late 1980s when a series of gruesome murders started in Riverside County, California. His victims were primarily young women, many of whom were involved in sex work. Suff targeted vulnerable individuals, often luring them into his vehicle under the pretense of being a client. His modus operandi involved extreme violence, sexual assault, and torture, and he would often strangle his victims to death. Afterward, he would dispose of their bodies in remote locations, making it difficult for authorities to link the cases. Suff's murderous spree came to an end in 1995 when he was arrested for an unrelated shoplifting incident. During his time in custody, evidence linking him to the murders began to emerge. He was subsequently charged and put on trial for the murders of multiple women. In 1995, Suff was found guilty of 12 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He received the death penalty for his heinous crimes, solidifying his place as one of California's most notorious serial killers. William Lester Suff, the Riverside Prostitute Killer or Lake Elsinore Killer, is a disturbing figure in the annals of American crime. Here are some interesting and chilling facts about him. Suff's brutal crimes earned him multiple nicknames, including the Riverside Prostitute Killer and the Lake Elsinore Killer, reflecting the areas where many of his victims were found. Suff was convicted of 12 counts of murder, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in California's history. His murderous spree spanned several years and claimed the lives of numerous women. One of the gruesome signatures of Suff's crimes was his habit of tying ligatures around his victims' necks, often with intricate knots. This detail was crucial in linking many of the murders. Suff was known for subjecting his victims to horrific acts of torture and sexual violence before ending their lives. His crimes were marked by extreme brutality. Despite his criminal history, Suff initially evaded suspicion in the murders. He was considered an unlikely suspect due to his job as a warehouse clerk and his seemingly ordinary lifestyle. Many of Suff's victims were sex workers, and he would often pose as a potential client to lure them into his vehicle before attacking them. Before his killing spree, Suff had a long history of criminal activity, including theft, burglary, and arson. His early criminal behavior foreshadowed his eventual descent into violence. Some of the victims in Suff's case remained unidentified for years, adding to the complexity of the investigation. It was only through diligent police work and advances in forensic technology that their identities were eventually determined. Suff's capture came about when he was arrested for shoplifting at a store in Riverside County in 1995. This seemingly minor incident ultimately led to his conviction for the murders. In 1995, Suff was sentenced to death for his crimes. He remains on death row in California's San Quentin State Prison, where he has spent the years awaiting his execution. After his arrest, Suff cooperated with authorities and provided details about his crimes, leading to the closure of several cold cases and providing some solace to the families of his victims. The investigation into Suff's crimes and his eventual capture contributed to the development of criminal profiling techniques and the understanding of serial killers' behaviors. William Lester Suff's dark and disturbing legacy continues to serve as a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that can exist within individuals and the tireless efforts of law enforcement to bring them to justice. Thank you for venturing into the unsettling world of William Suff with us.